My boyfriend and I were both in our late 50s and grappling with disorganized attachment styles, early trauma, and a history of complex relationships. Given that our internal conflicts are significantly contributing to our challenges, what is one effective starting point or tool to help us lessen the chances of triggering each other? Okay, so that's a big question. So for this question, I'm going to call this segment 7 Steps to Manage Emotional Triggers in Fearful Avoidant or Disorganized Relationships. I'm really going to focus on the dynamics of disorganized attachment, which is also called fearful avoidance. I refer to this as spice of life attachment. And we're going to explore how it might create some difficulties in relationships. And then I'm going to suggest that the one effective starting point or tool to lessen the chances of triggering each other is to become masterful at managing our own triggers, right? And so to do this, I'm going to recommend that you take a mindful momentary pause. And there are 7 steps that we are going to take inside that momentary pause. And so following these steps is really going to help you go from being reactive and disconnected to feeling more at ease and confident, so you don't escalate the conflicts and experience more understanding and intimacy, okay? So first, I think it is useful to briefly define what is this attachment style and how it can create those push-pull patterns. So disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment usually comes from a lack of consistent or predictable care early in childhood, and it can lead to an inability to develop a more coherent strategy for forming more secure attachment relationships. And so this type of attachment style is usually characterized by confusing mixed signals and mixed behaviors. Sometimes they may seek closeness and safety from a partner while at the same time feeling very afraid of it and mistrusting the intimacy that they are seeking. In relationships, it can look like push-pull dynamics where they're oscillating between desperately wanting closeness and then abruptly punishing or pushing away their partner to protect themselves from some kind of anticipated pain or rejection or abandonment. And so this pattern can create a lot of emotional turbulence in the relationship, but it can also create a cycles of miscommunication and unresolved conflict. And so that makes it really challenging for both partners to feel secure and connected and therefore safe. The problem usually is that one person's behavior functions as a trigger for the other, and then the other person's response to that behavior is a trigger for them. And so it becomes kind of a conflict spiral. Okay. So for example, I'm going to offer you a case illustration. Let's call them Alexia and Jordan. And both of them have disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment styles. Okay. And it stems from their early childhood experiences. So in their relationship, let's say Alexia is a little bit more anxious, and we have Jordan who's a little bit more avoidant, but they both have fearful avoidant tendencies. Okay. So Alexia tends to deeply crave emotional intimacy, and she frequently seeks reassurances and affection from Jordan. But Jordan, who tends to have a more avoidant leanings, feels overwhelmed by this pressure to provide constant reassurance. And so when he asks for space, it's usually in a vague way that communicates an annoyed tone of voice and does not indicate when this period of separation is going to end. So it also lacks a kind of emotional reassurance that Alexia is looking for. So then what happens is Alexia, her fear of abandonment is triggered, and then she emotionally lashes out and then preemptively withdraws, giving Jordan the silent treatment. In return, this triggers Jordan's fears of inadequacy and abandonment. Now he starts to believe that he's not allowed to have his needs for space in the relationship without being emotionally punished by Alexia. In response, he completely closes up and withdraws for days, if not weeks, from the relationship. This is a cycle of triggering and being triggered without really having the tools to effectively communicate or soothe oneself and the other person's fears. And so Alexia and Jordan get stuck in this loop of conflict, of misunderstanding each other, and it really illustrates these challenges that we can face when we have fearful avoidant attachment style in the relationship. So let me know in the chat or in the comments if you've ever experienced a situation like this. I'd love to know that. So the question becomes, well, how do we stop that push-pull pattern and start to ease some of these triggered reactions in relationships? Well, I suggest that it really begins by managing our own triggered responses with increased emotional control and flexibility. So we're going to call this next segment 7 steps to manage emotional triggers. Now, the one effective starting point or tool to lessen the chances of triggering each other is to become masterful at managing our own triggered responses. To do this, I'm going to recommend that we learn how to take a mindful pause. Now, don't underestimate the power of one mindful momentary pause, because there are several crucially important steps to take within that pause. And that's what we're going to explore next. So the first step, we're going to have to recognize when we are slipping into a triggered response, because you're likely to have an emotional, mental, physical, and behavioral trigger. So let's dig into that. That's really step 2. What are the signs? Right? So first, we have emotional signs. So this could look like the sudden onset of intense emotions like anger, fear, sadness, or anxiety, feeling overwhelmed or engulfed by those emotions. There could be a sense of panic or urgency without a clear reason. Then there are some mental signs. You might have racing thoughts or an inability to think clearly. Maybe there's catastrophic thinking or imagining the absolute worst case scenario. There's a lot of black and white thinking or viewing situations and people's in the extremes as all good or all bad, kind of villainizing each other. There can be an instant feeling of defensiveness or a need to justify oneself, usually in response to feeling shame or guilt. Then there are the more physical signs. So your heart rate increases. You might have shallow, rapid breathing or a feeling of being unable to really breathe deeply. There's muscle tension and tightness, especially in the shoulders, in the neck, or the jaw. Maybe your stomach starts to feel uncomfortable. You feel nauseous or like it's tied up in knots. Maybe your throat starts to close up or you feel like you're going to cry. You might feel hot or sweaty. Maybe you get chills. Maybe you have an urgency in your hands and your feet to just fight or flee, right? Then there can be some more behavioral signs. So there's an impulse to have to respond or react or take immediate action, right? So practically speaking, maybe this means you have to instantly respond to a text message or an email or something like that. Maybe you find yourself pulling back, withdrawing, or just shutting down. Maybe you dissociate right away. You might seek some kind of escape through things like substances, or maybe there's a compulsive behavior, something to physically disconnect you from the circumstance. You want to be able to recognize, am I experiencing any of these triggers? And what are they? Well, it's a mental, emotional, physical kind of trigger. And so then the third step now is you want to stop everything and just breathe. So at the first sign of that trigger, once you've identified it, stop everything and just take a pause. That means stopping all action, conversation, or thought processes to prevent those automatic reactions from just kind of taking over and responding from a place of fear. To do that, you're going to take slow, deep breaths. Deep breathing really allows you to calm the nervous system and shift from that reactive state to being more centered and present in the moment. 4 is now you're going to reflect on the cause of that trigger. So you want to reflect on what specifically triggered that reaction. Was it a word? Was it an action? Was it their tone of voice? Maybe there was an internal narrative going on. Maybe you had an internal trigger that flipped on the switch, right? Recognizing the trigger is really important for then understanding it and then ultimately neutralizing its power in the moment. And so then once we identify the trigger, we've been able to locate where it exists in the body and what's that creating for me. The next step is to name the feeling, right, which is the energy constellated around it. You want to try to name the feeling that you're having without judgment. Is it anger? Is it fear? Is it sadness? Is it shame? Is it guilt? Or is it something else? Try not to use evaluative words to describe your feelings. So things like, I feel abandoned, or I feel neglected, or I feel dismissed. These are all words that describe somebody else's behavior towards you. So it's going to decenter you in that moment. That's not what we're trying to affect. So try to center yourself. So words that describe your feelings are words that describe the energy that is going through your body, inside your body at that time. So for example, instead of I feel abandoned, what is the feeling of abandonment? Heavy, hollow, disconnected, frustrated, angry, helpless. These words are closer to the true experience you're having inside your own mind and body. And that's what we want to rely upon when we name the feeling. Because even if it's a tough feeling, if you're naming it accurately, you're going to recenter yourself in that moment, in that experience. Because now when we identify the feeling and we name it, we are also helping to separate ourselves from that emotion. We are separating that emotion and that triggered response from taking over our identity. Okay. Once you name it, you define it, you draw lines around it. It's not me, it's a feeling I'm having. Okay. And that allows you to question the automatic stories and beliefs that come up with that trigger. So is this belief accurate, or is it actually an old narrative from a past trauma that I am lumping onto the present situation, right? So it's really about challenging those immediate assumptions that are fueling the reaction so that we can start to diffuse it. So let's just review those one more time. Step one is you're going to develop an awareness around your triggers proactively. Step two, you're going to look for signs of those triggers when you're having them. And remember, those are emotional, mental, physical, and behavioral. Step three, you're going to stop everything and take a breath. Step four, you're going to reflect on what is the cause. And step five, we're going to accurately name the feeling. Now, step six, we're going to respond and not react. So when we have a clearer understanding of the trigger, the feeling, and the story, we can consciously choose how to respond to it. This might mean expressing your needs calmly. It might mean asking for a moment to process and step away until you can come back. It might mean that you have to decide on a new specific boundary. Okay. I also recommend that you express curiosity for the other person's experience as well. Now, a caveat to that, of course, is if this situation is abusive in nature, you will need to remove yourself and seek outside support until it is safe. Remember, if it is an abusive situation, you always need to remove yourself first. Now, step 7 is to offer reassurance. So remember that in that moment, you're reassuring yourself and you're reassuring your partner. You're there because you love each other and you're both motivated to find a place of harmony and ease in your relationships. Anger lets you know that there's a need for connection and support in the face of fearful or helpless feelings. Okay, so reminding yourself and your partner of this fact is going to help you see the anger as a way of trying to find connection again, of feeling understood by each other. And so using things like safe strategies with anxious partners and soft strategies with more avoidant or fearful avoidant partners in communication can be really highly effective in offering reassurance. If you want to learn more about that, I recommend checking out my course, The Courageous Communicator. It's a 90-day online course to help singles and couples develop healthy communication skills based on attachment style. And we do use trauma-informed energy healing and art therapy techniques in that program. Because, I really believe that if emotional intimacy is your destination, then attachment styles are going to get you there, but they're not going to get you there without any gas. And to my mind, communication, it's more than the words that we speak. It's the energy that we feel and that we express in relationships. And so when we learn the right words to say without processing the emotional energy behind them, then it's just going to keep us caught in the cyclical negative patterns of resentment and love. But when we're able to apply energy healing practices to the words that the new languages that we are learning, the new vocabulary that we are learning, then it helps us go from feeling misunderstood and disconnected to feeling more connected and confident, because we're no longer allowing the energy from past traumas to kind of dictate our present responses. And that's really what I believe creates that lasting emotional intimacy. So if you want to learn more about that, I'll leave a link to that in the caption of the replay. So let's just bring this segment all together with some final thoughts. So taking a mindful pause to manage emotional triggers is really a powerful starting point for individuals who struggle with spice of life attachment, fearful avoidance, or disorganized attachment. And by developing awareness around our triggers, taking that mindful moment to stop and breathe so that we can reflect on the cause, name the feeling, and choose a different way to respond, now we can offer reassurance to ourselves and to our partners. And when we can do that, now we're transforming conflict into really a gateway to deeper levels of intimacy, understanding, and connection with our partners. Now, that said, it is also important, particularly if we struggle with fearful avoidant attachment, for each person to have outside therapeutic support to assist them in working through their internal conflicts. That way, you're better equipped to show up to the relationship with the skills, capacities, and the coping mechanisms that you need in order to take that mindful pause, because it is a muscle that you have to build, and it does get stronger over time the more you practice it. The other thing that I would leave you with is I would remind you that it is not about eliminating all your triggers entirely and forever, or never feeling an uncomfortable feeling again. So healing is not the elimination of anxiety or pain. It is increasing our capacity to effectively hold those emotions and those feelings, which allows us to integrate them and therefore experience a wider range of human emotion, right? And that allows us to have that increased self-awareness and self-mastery. I like to call it self-sovereignty. So I hope that that was helpful in addressing that question. I'd love to know in the chat or in the comments there if anyone who's here with me relates to this topic, or if you've ever struggled with taking that mindful pause in a heated moment. You know, what's the hardest part about that? I would love to see your feedback there. Also, remember to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week and I wouldn't want you to miss out.